We are officially 1 month away from the month of May, and hopefully all of the preparations and pageantry that will lead up to the 105th running of the Indianapolis 500. And the good news is, after a year's absence, it looks like bumping will for sure return to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway this year. And because things in April are about to get extremely hot and heavy for IndyCar and around the IndyCar world, this will be the last update before we have an official entry list on the entries for this year's Indianapolis 500. I am personally feeling fairly confident that we will see exactly 36 entries. That would be 18 entries coming from the Honda camp and 18 entries coming from the Chevy camp. Now, this is probably going to be the maximum number of entries that we are going to see in the Indy 500 during this particular era of the sport, the twin turbocharged V6 era. Until something changes where teams can put engines in backup cars, or possibly we have a third manufacturer at some point, I don't think we are going to see much more than 36. It seems like generally Honda and Chevy are quite content to supply around 18 entries each year. Now, sometimes that swings one direction or the other, where Honda does 16 and Chevy does 20, or vice versa, but I think 36 is generally speaking the number, the max number that we are going to see. And I don't want to paint that as a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I think it really, if it is 36 entries, and even the fact that we're talking about bumping this year, the year after the kind of disastrous lead up to the 2020 Indianapolis 500 and everything that kind of is going on in the world, especially with the pandemic and the uncertainty in the economy, the fact that we have more than 33 entries is quite honestly, that's a testament to Roger Penske and his leadership. And I don't get to say as many good things, or haven't been able to say as many good things about Roger Penske and his leadership over IndyCar, but this is one thing that I definitely want to point to, because let's say there are 36 entries, or even if there's 35, that's a major win. Somehow Roger Penske has not only convinced the car owners to be confident enough in the pandemic to be entering cars, he's been able to convince Chevy and Honda that it's a good idea to have more cars than spots in the starting field, and he's convinced the sponsors and backers that this is a good idea. And I need to remind everybody that just 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago, Roger Penske was openly campaigning against a bump day, and now he is in charge, and he has seen through a pandemic. Apparently, we're going to have bump day again, and that's a fantastic grade, an A+ as far as I would be concerned, especially if Penske's able to convince the powers that be to allow the Indianapolis 500 to allow everybody in who wants to buy a ticket. And hopefully that's the way things go, but at least from an entry perspective, it's looking like very, very good news, and certainly I want to give the credit to Roger Penske that he does deserve. Now, let's talk about that, and of course, we will start with Team Penske. 4 entries, you guys are well aware of these at this point. The only kind of difference between this time and last time is that we have confirmations of sponsors. Joseph Newgarden will be running the traditional Shell sponsorship, but this year it'll be a black car with FuelRewards.com as the primary sponsor, and Scott McLaughlin will be taking over the reins of the Pennzoil number 3. So that's Team Penske sorted. Just had an announcement today for Beretta Autosport. Now, this car is essentially a 5th Team Penske car. They have the former Juncos Racing, or I guess current Juncos Racing chassis. That car has been leased to Penske to put together this team for Beretta Autosport. Simona Di Silvestro and Rocket Mortgage is the sponsor of that team. Andretti Autosport. This is where we're going to have some discussion. Obviously, Herta, Rossi, Hunter-Reay, Hinchcliffe, and Marco Andretti, last year's pole sitter. Those are the locked-in cars. We know that they're going to be there. The question is, who's going to be in that 6th car? Currently, I have it numbered as 25. It could be numbered any old number. Marshall Pruitt, in his article about the entry list, seemed to be very adamant that the front runner was Oliver Askew. I don't know who he has talked to. I know who I have talked to. As far as I'm aware, that is not a done deal by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, some people I've spoken to say that Askew is for sure not going to be the 6th Andretti Autosport driver. So who it could be, I honestly don't have a really strong answer. I think there's a couple of names in addition to Oliver Askew. I think you look at Ryan Norman. I think you look at Stephen Wilson. Maybe even go as far as to say somebody like Oriol Servia. Maybe you could go really crazy and say like maybe Sage Karam moves over. But I think this is for sure happening. It's just going to be a matter of who the driver is, and we just have no idea right now until an announcement is made who that is going to be. Chip Ganassi Racing, this is extremely straightforward. Marcus Ericsson, Scott Dixon, Alex Palou, and Tony Kanaan. Those 4 drivers have been known for quite a while, so there's not much to talk about there. There is something to talk about here at Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan Racing, and that is that as far as my understanding goes, Santino Ferrucci is going to be the 3rd driver at that team, and that will be an extremely strong 3-car lineup when you consider the fact that Sato, Rahal, and Ferrucci are the drivers who finished 1st, 3rd, and 4th in last year's Indianapolis 500. That team, the defending winners, are going from strength to strength, and again, I think Ferrucci in this team is an absolute threat to win the race, considering that they have won it previously, won it last year, and Ferrucci has definitely shown that he has the chops at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It hasn't been confirmed yet that Ferrucci is the 3rd car, but I think it's worth banking on. I'll just say that. Arrow McLaren SP, again, it's straightforward. Pato Award, Felix Rosenquist, Juan Pablo Montoya, 2-time winner of the Indianapolis 500. The only thing that was different from the last time I talked about this is that Juan Pablo Montoya will have primary sponsorship from Mission Foods, which is one of the one of the existing partners with Arrow McLaren SP. Ed Carpenter Racing. Same 3 drivers as we always know. Ed Carpenter, Rinus VeeKay, Connor Daly. They will have new liveries for all 3 cars this year. Some of them are very sharp, but outside of that, there's not really anything else to talk about from the Ed Carpenter stable. Meyer Shank Racing. Jack Harvey, Elio Castroneves. Locked them in at 2 cars. Originally, I had said that there was a potential 3rd entry there with Jackie Heinrecher, and I think they're very possible that could have had some discussion at some point. But I also believe that my source may have been a bit confused when they informed me that there was a female entry being put together behind the scenes, and may have gotten that confused with the Peretta Autosport entry. But we did know that Jackie Heinrecher at one point was looking at doing an entry, and if it would have been with a team, I assume it would have been with Meyer Shank, but this team, lock him in at 2 cars. A team that was formerly at 2 cars is Dreyer Reinbold Racing. That car is apparently going to be a 1-car team. I've got Sage Karam in that seat. Dennis Reinbold, who is the team owner of that team, has always said that Sage is his number 1 choice every year. And so them cutting back to 1 car seems to indicate to me that Sage Karam would get the nod over J.R. Hildebrand. Now, keep this in mind, with this team and the next team I talk about, is that this team going to 1 car opens up a Chevy engine lease to another team that potentially would want it. Same for Carlin Racing. 1 car entry, almost certainly, in fact, I will say certainly, it's going to be Max Chilton. They decided not to do another car, which, of course, opened up another Chevrolet engine lease that probably wouldn't have been available if Carlin had decided to go with 2 cars. That engine lease, at least one of those Chevys, I believe is going to Top Gun. It was reported in Racer.com, the article that Marshall Pruitt put out about the Indy 500 entry list, that Honda is full in terms of their entry for the Indianapolis 500, and Top Gun was not on that. So it stands to reason that RC Anderson, Top Gun Racing, will be running with a Chevrolet power plant. And considering that Reinbold and Carlin cut back this year, that leads again to believe that they're going to have a Chevy. They have bought 2 brand new Dallara chassis, so this team is very much serious. I know there was a lot of question about their seriousness. In fact, I questioned it for quite a while, but it certainly seems like this is going to happen, and more power to them. I love seeing new teams participate, especially at Indianapolis. Dale Coyne Racing. Now this is where some question marks are going to appear. Ed Jones, we know, and recently was confirmed that the second car, which is the Romain Grosjean car on pretty much every track but Indianapolis and Texas, Pietro Fittipaldi will drive the car. And that's pretty cool because it's going to be the first time, believe it or not, since 1995 that a Fittipaldi will even have been entered in the Indianapolis 500, much less raced in it. And that's, of course, assuming that Pietro can qualify, which I'm sure he will at least have a pretty good shot at it. But the second question mark really is, or the big question mark at Dale Coyne Racing, is the number 52 car. Still no driver confirmed. And I've got 2 names on there, James Davison and Cody Ware. Now, why do I have 2 names on there? Well, Cody Ware is currently, on the day of recording this video, taking his oval rookie test at Texas Motor Speedway. If he passes that, I can only assume, because the 51 and 52 cars out of the Dale Coyne stable are affiliated with Rick Ware Racing, I would assume that Rick Ware would want to put his son in the car, if at all possible. Now, if he fails his rookie test, or just they decide that he's not ready for Indianapolis, I could see James Davison running this race in replacement of Cody Ware. But again, nothing has been confirmed yet, and probably won't be until much closer to the Indianapolis 500. Remember, at the beginning of May is actually the Texas race, so if Ware passes his rookie test at Texas, and they run him at Texas, and he doesn't do well enough at Texas, you still could see a driver swap here. It's just a question of how will Cody Ware pick up the ovals in IndyCar. And the final team, AJ Foyt Racing. Now, this was quite a shock, quite a surprise when I heard it. I didn't believe it for a little while, but it's now been reported enough that it certainly seems like it's true. And I have to tell you that I think the source that originally gave me this information was absolutely right. Dalton Kellett, Charlie Kimball, Sebastian Bourdais. Those were the 3 we thought were only going to be the 3 at AJ Foyt Racing, but with Brian Reinbold cutting back to 1 car, that meant that J.R. Hildebrand, and presumably, though this hasn't been confirmed yet, his sponsor, Salesforce, were kind of out in the cold. Well, AJ Foyt Racing is entering a 4th car, and I believe that Hildebrand is bringing his sponsor to that car. Foyt has picked up the engine lease from Brian Reinbold that they relinquished, and I think it's going to be an interesting fit. Hildebrand certainly has the oval chops, and Bourdais certainly is a setup-minded driver, so you've really got pretty... And Charlie Kimball's a very savvy driver at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So I think you got 3 fairly strong drivers there, and I think they can certainly help Dalton Kellett quite a bit, who, quite honestly, showed a lot of impressive speed last year in the Indianapolis 500 time trials. So I think Foyt, I think a lot of people, I remember seeing the comments saying that Foyt was crazy for going with a 4th car. I'm not necessarily sure that's true. I mean, we'll have to see on bump day who's actually in the mix there, but I think this isn't probably as crazy as one might think. And certainly, I would say that if Hildebrand has got this ride and Salesforce is continuing with him, that would be a big sponsor that would subsidize the ride anyway, even if Hildebrand misses the show. So, again, that's not confirmed, but that's just kind of me piecing everything together. And quite frankly, J.R. Hildebrand's really the only one who makes sense at this late hour to have somehow finagled his way into a 4th Foyt car. Really don't see anybody else who really fits the bill. A sponsored driver with recent experience and Chevrolet ties. the pieces are all kind of fitting together. So, that is the path to 36 entries for the Indianapolis 500. It's probably way too early, but I'll ask anyway. Who do you think are the 3 drivers who are going to go home? We're going to get a pretty good idea of that, or at least a little bit of an idea of who's fast and who's slow, coming up in just about a week at the Indianapolis 500 Open Test. There's apparently going to be 32 of the names that you're seeing right here running at that test. And remember, in 2019, that's where I made the big prediction that Fernando Alonso was going to be in trouble, and it turned out that that was ended up being the case. So I'm not saying I'm going to make any major predictions this year or that they're going to be right, certainly, but I think you're going to want to tune in for my coverage of that test anyway, because anything could happen, and we're going to have a good idea of where all the teams stand leading in to the month of May. So thank you guys so much for watching. Who will fill the remaining seats? Who will get bumped? Let me know down in the comment section below. This has been David Land on YouTube, and I will see you in the next video.